Sarah had always been a dutiful wife, managing their household, raising their 2 children, and supporting Mark in his small business ventures. But as she approached her 40th birthday, the monotony of domestic life began to suffocate her. The spark that once fueled her marriage had dwindled into a faint ember, barely visible beneath the weight of responsibility. One fateful evening at a charity gala with Mark, Sarah locked eyes across the room with Jake, a charismatic entrepreneur who owned several successful nightclubs in town. Their connection was instantaneous and electric, igniting a desire within Sarah she hadn't felt in years. As they exchanged flirtatious banter, Sarah found herself torn between her loyalty to Mark and the intoxicating pull of this new attraction. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and Jake's clandestine meetings became more frequent. They would steal away to secluded spots around town, park benches, empty alleys, and even a hidden cabin in the woods, to indulge in passionate encounters that left them both breathless and yearning for more. Sarah felt alive again, her senses awakened by Jake's boldness and confidence. But as their affair intensified, so did the guilt and fear of discovery. Sarah's once peaceful life was now a web of lies and deception. She began to dread returning home, where Mark's innocent questions about her whereabouts only served to heighten her anxiety. The weight of her double life threatened to crush her. One night, as she lay in bed beside Mark, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She glanced out their bedroom window and spotted Jake lurking in the shadows across the street, a chilling reminder that he knew where she lived. Panic set in as she realized how vulnerable she had become. The following day, a knock at the front door shattered her fragile composure. It was Mrs. Thompson, their nosy neighbor from down the block. Sarah's heart raced as she opened the door, fearing that Mrs. Thompson might have stumbled upon one of her clandestine meetings with Jake. "Sarah, dear, I've been meaning to talk to you," Mrs. Thompson said, her voice laced with concern. "I noticed Mark hasn't been himself lately. He seems distant and preoccupied. Is everything all right in your marriage?" Sarah's mind raced as she tried to come up with a plausible explanation for Mark's behavior. But before she could respond, Jake appeared at the window behind Mrs. Thompson, a shocking sight that left Sarah speechless. "Jake!" Mrs. Thompson exclaimed, her eyes widening in disbelief. "What are you doing here? I was just—" Jake stammered, his face flushed with embarrassment as he realized he had been caught spying on Sarah's house. Sarah felt the room spin around her as she struggled to process this unexpected turn of events. She glanced at Mark, who sat motionless on the couch, oblivious to the drama unfolding before him. In that moment, Sarah knew she couldn't continue living a life built on lies and deceit. With a heavy heart, she made the difficult decision to end things with Jake and confront her husband about their troubled marriage. It wouldn't be easy, but it was the only way to reclaim her integrity and rebuild trust with those she loved. As Mrs. Thompson departed, leaving behind an awkward silence, Sarah turned to face Mark. She took a deep breath and began to speak, hoping that honesty would be the first step toward healing their fractured relationship. "Mark," she said softly, "I need to tell you something. There's been someone else in my life lately. A man named Jake. We've been seeing each other behind your back, and I'm so sorry for the pain this will cause you." Mark looked at her with a mix of shock and disbelief, his eyes searching hers for any sign of deception. Sarah held his gaze, her voice trembling as she continued. "I know I should have told you sooner, but I was afraid of losing everything we've built together. But seeing Jake outside our window today made me realize that I can't keep living a lie. I want to work through this with you and rebuild our marriage on honesty and trust." Mark sat in stunned silence for several moments before finally speaking. "I don't know what to say, Sarah," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "I feel betrayed, but at the same time, I understand how unhappy you've been lately. We need to talk about this more, but first, we need some space." Sarah nodded, understanding the gravity of their situation. "Of course, Mark. Whatever it takes for us to move forward," she replied, her voice filled with resolve and determination. As they sat in silence, contemplating the uncertain future ahead, Sarah knew that the road to redemption would be long and arduous. But she was ready to face it head-on, armed with nothing but honesty and a deep desire to reclaim the love and trust that once defined their relationship. The next few weeks were a blur of counseling sessions, tearful confrontations, and long, sleepless nights. Sarah and Mark worked tirelessly to rebuild their marriage, but the scars from her infidelity ran deep. One evening, as they sat on the couch together, Mark turned to Sarah with a somber expression. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice measured. "I know you're committed to making things right between us, and I appreciate that, but I need some time to process everything. Can we take a break from each other for a while?" Sarah's heart sank at the prospect of being apart from Mark again, but she understood his need for space. "Of course, Mark," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll give you all the time you need." As he left their bedroom, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of loneliness wash over her. She wandered aimlessly through the empty house, her mind consumed by thoughts of Jake and the life they had shared. In a moment of weakness, she found herself standing in front of the hidden cabin where they used to meet. The memory of his touch, his voice, and his laughter threatened to overwhelm her. She knew she should turn around and walk away, but her feet seemed rooted to the spot. Suddenly, the cabin door creaked open and Jake emerged from the shadows. His eyes locked onto hers, filled with a mix of longing and regret. "Sarah," he whispered, taking a step closer. "I've missed you so much." She felt her resolve crumble as she gazed into his eyes, remembering the passion they once shared. But before she could respond, Mark's voice echoed in her mind, his plea for honesty and trust. With a heavy heart, Sarah turned away from Jake and began walking back to their house. She knew that returning to him would mean abandoning any hope of salvaging her marriage with Mark. As she approached the front door, she noticed a small package waiting on the porch, a gift from Mark, no doubt an attempt to show his love and support despite everything they had been through. Sarah picked up the box, feeling a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other after all. Inside the package was a beautiful silver necklace with a small heart pendant, a symbol of their enduring love and commitment to one another. Sarah's eyes welled up with tears as she fastened it around her neck, feeling the weight of Mark's devotion. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the difficult conversations ahead. It wouldn't be easy to rebuild their relationship, but with this necklace serving as a reminder of their love and resilience, Sarah knew they could face whatever challenges lay before them. As she stepped inside the house, she called out to Mark, her voice trembling with emotion. "Mark, I'm home." The sound of his footsteps echoed through the hallway, growing louder until he appeared in front of her. His eyes searched hers, filled with a mix of sadness and hope. "I missed you too," he said softly, pulling her into his arms. Sarah felt a sense of peace wash over her as she nestled against him, knowing that they still had a long journey ahead, but were taking the first steps toward healing and rebuilding their love.